Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree if you are new here, and welcome back to another episode of History of Bands, where I do my makeup while I tell you guys the history of a band. Today's band is one of my favorites. I have a very special memory tied to this band, so I'm very excited about this one. Today I'm going to be talking about Periphery. I'm not going to lie. When I decided to do Periphery, I was a little nervous about it because I know how some of Periphery's fan base can be, and also generally how some of the gent and prog fan bases can be. So be kind to me in the comments, please and thank you. With that being said, if you guys want to hang out while I do some makeup and chat about the history of Periphery, then just keep on watching. Alright, a little housekeeping at the beginning before I dive into the actual video itself. If you're also here for the makeup, cool, hi, hello. I will not be talking about the makeup at all in this video, obviously. So if you're curious about any product that I'm using, I will have it all listed and linked down below for you guys. I will also have my playlist of other history of bands linked down below, and at some point throughout this video it'll be up in the eye. And if you're new here, I do these history of band videos about once a month, as well as I try to do it every 2 weeks, but sometimes there just isn't content for it. So at least once a month I do a news video talking about mostly bands that I've already talked about or that I plan on talking about in the future. News with them, new releases, tours, anything that's happened, all of that, as well as discussing some new music that has come out recently. This isn't the only thing, music related on my channel, but I also do a bunch of, beauty content, stuff like that as well, if you're into that as well. Without further ado, let's talk about the history of Periphery. I love that that kind of rhymes. Periphery was founded in 2005 by Misha Mansour, originally playing not only guitar, but drums as well, until he found local drummer Jason Berlin, who was soon replaced by Travis Orban. Alex Boyes and Tom Murphy joined on guitar and bass respectively, and Jake Veretica came on as their vocalist. Jake Bowen was added on for guitar in 2007. After a few years with this lineup, Jake V left and Casey Sabol briefly joined before Chris Barretto became Periphery's vocalist. During this time, the band didn't release any EPs or full-length albums, though through demos such as Icarus Lives, they were signed to Sumerian Records. In 2009, Travis left the band and was replaced by Matt Halpern. And fast forward just a little bit more, January 2010 was a very eventful month for Periphery. Not only was their debut album announced through Sumerian, amidst speculation that Chris had left the band, Spencer Sotelo was announced as their new vocalist. Chris's departure from the band was stated to be due to personal differences, and it actually caused a minor feud that would last for several years. On April 20th, 2010, Periphery released their debut self-titled full-length album. The band had a hand in producing it alongside Matt Murphy. The lyrics were originally nearly completed by previous vocalists Chris and Casey. The band chose to just have Spencer re-record the tracks with nearly no changes. The album was received well critically. Early on, they were already seen as an inspiration for prog bands to come. The album charted at number 128 on the Billboard 200 and number 2 on the US Heat Seekers albums chart. 3 days later, on April 23rd, the band released the single Icarus Lives. The band then headed out on several support and headlining tours in support of the album, though these tours were full of disasters, such as Spencer getting bronchitis and not being able to perform full sets, and Jake breaking his finger in the first week of tour and being completely unable to play. On January 9th, 2011, the music video for Jetpacks was released. However, it was a completely re-recorded and restructured version of the song, and that would be later featured on the Icarus EP. On March 22nd, 2011, Periphery released a cover of Metallica's One for the Homefront video game soundtrack. And then on April 19th, 2011, just one day short of a full year after the release of their full-length album, they released the Icarus EP. And then a month later, on May 24th, they released the Frack the Gods single. On June 6th, Periphery had announced via MySpace that they had parted ways with the guitarist Alex Boyes and would be hiring Mark Holcomb and Adam Nolly Getgood to play Alex's live parts until they found a permanent replacement. That fall, the band announced that they would be opening for Dream Theater on their EU leg of their 2012 tour. Shortly after that, the band announced that Mark would be permanently joining the band, and shortly after this, Tom left the band, resulting in Nolly's permanent placement in the band as well. On February 12th, 2012, Periphery re-released their debut album with the new single Passenger. And pretty much immediately after this, they headed back into the studio to work on their next 2 full-length albums. Ahead of the first album's release, on June 5th, 2012, they released their first single, Make Total Destroy. And then just about a month later, on July 3rd, P2, this time it's personal, was released. The album was produced by Misha and Nolly. And this is the first album to feature the lineup that lasted them for several years and is basically the lineup that we know today. The album sold nearly 12,000 copies in its first week and reached number 44 on the Billboard 200. It also charted on a ton of other charts internationally. The album was received well critically and was even ranked number 3 on Guitar World's Top 50 Albums of 2012. 2 more music videos were released in support of P2, Scarlet on February 20th, 2013, and Ragnarok on October 3rd, 2013, with the latter being directed by Jeff Holcomb, Mark's brother and the band's occasional bassist. In September of 2013, Spencer hinted at an upcoming EP to hold fans over until their anticipated 3rd full-length album. About a month later, it was announced that Misha, Mark, and Jake would have signature pickups released, as well as Jake's Ibanez Titan would be made as a signature guitar. In November of that year, Chris Barretto made a surprise appearance to perform Icarus Lives with the band, which not only marked the end of that tour, but also marked the end of the feud between Chris and the band. On January 28th, 2014, Periphery released their EP, Clear. This EP is an experimental project. Aside from the intro track, each member composed and creatively directed their own track. It charted at number 62 on the Billboard 200 and number 2 on the US Top Hard Rock Albums chart. Ahead of the full release of the dual albums Juggernaut Alpha and Omega, several singles were released, bouncing back and forth between the 2 records. On November 21st, 2014, the first single was released, The Scourge. Shortly after that, The Bad Thing on December 4th. This was followed up by 22 Faces on December 16th, And then lastly from Omega, Graveless on December 31st. And then just before the album's release, one final single, Alpha, on January 5th, 2015. Juggernaut, Alpha and Omega was released on January 27th, 2015 as a double album release. Alpha received major critical acclaim, as well as charting internationally, including number 22 on the Billboard 200 and number 2 on the US Top Hard Rock Albums chart. Omega also received critical acclaim and charted internationally, including number 25 on the Billboard 200 and number 4 on the US Independent Albums chart. The band spent 2015 on tour in support of Alpha and Omega, and then hit the ground running on tracking their next album in early 2016. Their first single came on May 25th, 2016, The Price is Wrong. And then just about a month later, Flatline was released on June 24th. One more single was released before the album, Marigold, on July 8th. On July 22nd, 2016, Periphery's next full-length album was released, P3 Select Difficulty. The album was received well critically and charted internationally with spots such as number 22 on the Billboard 200. The major success of the album being the song The Price is Wrong, receiving a Grammy nomination for Best Metal Performance in the company of bands such as Korn, Megadeth, and Gojira. In my opinion, P3 is peak Periphery. It is their most cohesive and well-written album, but I will admit that I am biased, as it was not only my first Periphery album, but it also features the song Loon, which was my husband and my wedding song. The band, of course, headed out on tour in support of the album, though without Nolly, as he announced that he would be skipping the tour to focus on his personal production projects. About a year and a half later, on October 3rd, 2017, Nolly announced via Facebook that he was formally departing from the band to focus on his family as well as production and get good drums. Periphery chose not to replace him and continued to just backtrack beats. In addition to the shakeup in Periphery's world, on April 19th, 2018, almost exactly 8 years to the day of their release of their first album, it was announced that they were leaving Sumerian and would be going technically independent, signing themselves to their own label, 3 Dot Recordings. Shortly after going independent, Periphery headed back into the studio, and on February 6, 2019, they announced their upcoming record alongside the first single, Blood Eagle. A few weeks later, they released the second single, Garden in the Bones, on March 1st, 2019. On April 5th, 2019, Periphery released their 6th studio album, P5 Hail Stan. This is the first album since Nolly's departure. However, he is credited for all of the bass tracks, and he and Misha were the producers of the record. Despite the album receiving massive critical acclaim, P5 marks a descent on the charts for the band, hitting number 163. Despite the album receiving massive critical acclaim, P5 marks a descent on the charts for the band, hitting number 63 on the Billboard 200, which is of course still very impressive. However, the album did chart at number 1 on the US Independent Albums chart. Luckily, the band had about a year to tour in support of the album before the pandemic. During the early part of the pandemic, the boys in Periphery seemed to put their focus on their solo work, which, makes sense when you can't, be together. You're gonna do your solo stuff. In March of 2021, it was announced that they were in the studio as a band. However, it would be another 2 years before anything would come of it. In January 2023, the band simultaneously released 2 singles from the new record, both featuring callback references. The first being Wildfire, calling back to the motif of the Alpha song, The Event. And the second song being Zagreus, something like that, which features the primary riff from the song Four Lights. A little over a month later, the band released one final single, Atropos on February 16th. Finally, on March 10th, 2023, Periphery's 7th studio album was released. P5, Gent is not a genre. I'm going to interject myself here. I've just realized that I called Hail Stan P5. That's P4. Listen, the number doesn't align with the studio album numbers because of Alpha and Omega, and it got really confusing. So we're on the 7th album, but it's P5. Back to the video. The album was entirely self-produced in collaboration with Nolly. P5 was once again given critical acclaim, calling it a masterclass in prog, among other praise. That being said, P5 is by far their lowest charting record, barely cracking the Billboard 200 at number 198 and only hitting a few international charts. In 2024, after performing acoustic versions of a few songs on tour, the band teamed up with Mike Daw to release acoustic versions of Scarlet from P2 and It's Only Smiles from P5. Nowadays, Periphery seems to head out on short-run tours, spending a few weeks on the road and then taking a few months off. Recently, they toured with Idola, and this fall they're headed to Australia for a 3-day run of a mini festival of sorts, alongside Coheed and Cambria, Intervals, Novelists, and a few other bands. Individually, the boys make their money from music-related endeavors like plugins, pickups, pedals, and productions. It's a lot of P's. I don't know how that happened. Misha, Matt, and Nolly co-own Get Good Drums. The entire band are partner owners of 3 Dot Recordings, as well as their merch line, Bottom Ramen. Basically, it seems as though all of the members of Periphery can generate enough income to sustain their lifestyles outside of the band. Unfortunately, though, it does seem like those outside endeavors do take precedent over the band. For a band that was pumping out albums nearly every year or two, going 4 years between P4 and P5 was a surprise. Extra time was of course expected considering the pandemic, but 4 years is insane. Personally, I think the band going independent removed a level of structure that I think was kind of beneficial for them. P2, P3, Alpha and Omega were some of the most well-written, produced, and cohesive records in progressive metal. P4 and P5 have their moments, but to me, they are nowhere near the caliber of the previous. Honestly, it just kind of feels like they don't care as much about the band as they once did. And now, to be fair, they are well over a decade into this, and they put in the work early on. So it's understandable when goals and life desires change, but I've always been in support of musicians making the music that they want, not solely catering to the audience. And it's entirely possible that P4 and P5 are just genuinely what they want to make. And if that's the case, then by all means, that's great for them. Not everything has to be for me. And I'm sure that there's plenty of people out there that love P4 and P5. Please don't come at me in the comments. Ideally though, I would love to see an album similar to Alpha, Omega, or P3. And that could very well just be a pipe dream for me, and that's okay. At the end of the day, I hope that Periphery continue to find success and happiness in whatever they do in the future, whether that be with the band or just continuing their more kind of behind the scenes production and equipment end of the spectrum. Whatever it is, I hope that they are happy and successful. And that's gonna wrap up my history of Periphery. Like I said, this is a fun one. I am very, I have an emotional bias towards the band. Like I said in the middle of the video, Loon was me and my husband's first dance at our wedding. We actually started dating very shortly before P3 came out. So It's always been like a very special album to me. And that song in particular is, of course, a special song to me. It's also a very special song to, I believe, Matt was the one that wrote it. Ah, I was right. Matt wrote Loon about his dogs, which are like children to him. So, very special song. Very beautiful song, of course. I also, we got to see them in 2017? I'm not sure. They were still touring P3 at the time. And I happened to see the set list for the tour, and they closed out that tour with Loon, and I was like, we have to go. Like, we have to. Because Loon always struck me as one of those kinds of songs that, like, you would never get to hear live, because it's a slower song, and, you know, they're a progressive metal band, and, you know, like, you don't expect to get to hear a song like that live. So anytime that I see that a band is playing a song that I love that I would never expect to get to hear live, I always try to make an effort to go see them, because I feel like it's like a 1 in a million shot, you know? Like, it's now or never. So that was very cool. Very, very cool. Anyways, that is going to wrap up today's video. Comment down below and tell me what you love about Periphery, or any opinions, gentle opinions that you have regarding anything that I said in today's video. And also let me know any bands that you would love to see me do one of these videos on. I love inspiration and suggestions. Please subscribe if you have not already. It would mean the world to me. Like this video, ring the bell, do all the things. I hope that you guys have an awesome, awesome day. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!